If you have a smartphone or BlackBerry, recording someone is as easy as taking the phone out and clicking a button. But Illinois residents are learning the hard way that they have to watch what they're recording, or else they could face felony charges and significant jail time. Paris Schutz has the story of two Chicago area residents who were unknowingly caught in the act and the obscure state law that got them in hot water.
It's a cold December day outside of Macy's on State Street. Artist Christopher Drew is trying to sell his work to passers-by. He knows what he's doing is illegal, but he wants to use his arrest to protest the city law that requires him to have a permit. A few feet away, a friend captures the encounter with police on videotape.
You can't sell stuff out here, buddy.
He turned to me and he told me it was illegal to sell anything in this spot and that I would have to leave. And I said, what about my First Amendment right to sell art in public? And he said, well, I don't want to argue that. He says, you're breaking the law. If you continue to sell, you will be arrested.
Drew admits that the police were cordial and professional, but in one of his pockets, he carried a recording device that caught the encounter with police.
I wanted to have evidence of what the officer said to me in public.
When police found Drew's recorder, they immediately dropped the misdemeanor peddling charges and booked him for a different crime, this one a felony, eavesdropping on a police officer.
It was a public conversation of a public officer on duty. How could we not have the right to bring this evidence together and bring this evidence into court? I was amazed that they could even write a law like this.
Illinois is one of only 12 states where it is illegal to record someone else's conversation without their permission. The law only applies to audio recording. If convicted of eavesdropping, a defendant can get up to 3 years in prison. When a law enforcement official is recorded, the penalty is stiffer. If convicted, Chris Drew faces a maximum 15-year sentence. Drew's friend, who captured the police action on tape, was not arrested. Harvey Grossman is the legal director of the ACLU of Illinois. He says the law gives police too much protection.
They don't want to be observed, they don't want to be recorded, they don't want to have a citizen have the upper hand on the police officer by having an actual recording.
The ACLU unsuccessfully sued the state's attorney's office to allow the recording of police officers while they're on duty. The case is now before a court of appeals.
We believe, much as the press frequently asserts, that there's a right to collect information, to gather information, to receive information. We're free to photograph police officers and civilians in their interactions. We are free to even take moving pictures of them, video of them. We can listen. We can take notes. The only thing we can't do, according to the state's attorney, is we can't record them using an audio device, and that, quite frankly, makes no sense at all.
There's reasons to say, no, we don't want people following the police with microphones, or even though it's a little bit inevitable given the state of technology in our society.
Harold Krent is an expert on First Amendment law. He says the eavesdropping statute has practical applications and was enacted to keep gang members and other criminals from spying on cops and getting information that could compromise an investigation.
We need to make sure that when the police act, they do so within some kind of secrecy so that they can put the steps of an investigation together, ask somebody about the whereabouts, try to trick somebody up by asking another question, and not have that relayed back to a gang member, a co-conspirator, or somebody else.
I don't see any reason why this law is in place other than to stop people from recording officers and holding officers accountable for misconduct.
Robert Johnson is an attorney who represents Tawanda Moore. Moore was arrested for eavesdropping after she tried to file a complaint against a police officer who she says fondled her and gave her his phone number. Internal Affairs officers interviewed her in this room and tried to persuade her not to file the complaint. Moore says she got scared when the officers would not allow her to leave the room.
One of the officers stood up, shut the door, and said, "You're not going anywhere, sit down." And at that point, they talked a little more than they left the room. And so she was thinking, you know, this is a bad situation, I can't leave, I want to leave. So the only thing she had was her cell phone, so she decided then to record.
Moore used this BlackBerry and says she wanted to document what was happening to her.
I think it's something that we can handle.
without having to go through this process and having you to come in from Indiana and waste your time. But I mean, that's what we're willing to do if that's what you choose to do. But I think we can almost guarantee that this won't happen to you again.
More, Warner case based on an exception to the law. It allows someone to record a conversation if they believe a crime is about to be committed against them.
A crime was being committed when she wasn't allowed to leave the room. It's unlawful restraint.
Johnson says Moore moved out of the area because of her experience.
This shouldn't be happening to people. And you would think that people would be, you know, a little sensitive to how women are treated by the Chicago Police Department.
Meanwhile, Chris Drew awaits trial and worries about a potential 15-year sentence, something Moore's attorney says is unfair.
If you had certain amounts of cocaine, you wouldn't get these kind of penalties. It seems like drug dealers should be are more of a danger to the public than somebody taping a police officer doing his job.
For Chicago Tonight, this is Paris Schutz. They already do red light violators, so it's in a bill before the Illinois General Assembly, and here's a synopsis of the bill. It's House Bill 3851. It amends the Illinois Vehicle Code to provide cities of over 1 million in population, read Chicago, to establish automated speed enforcement systems in designated safety zones. The penalty for and consequence of a traffic violation recorded by an ASE system is a civil fine not to exceed $100 for each violation. Now, the sponsor of the bill is House Speaker Mike Madigan, and we called Madigan's office today. A spokesperson said that the bill was filed at the request of the mayor, and he reiterated that essentially what it would do would be to reformat these existing red light cameras to be able to issue speeding citations.
And how many intersections would be affected, Paris?
Well, there are 191 red light camera intersections in Chicago. They're in heavily trafficked intersections like Cicero and North, Western and Cermak, Fullerton and Ashland, and there's no word on how many intersections they might impact, but the bill calls for intersections that are within a quarter of a mile of schools, recreational areas, parks, universities, and colleges to be fitted with these speeding cameras. And the city went out to some of these locations last spring, and they conducted their own study. They monitored every car going through these 7 intersections. And of the 1.5 million cars that went through, they found that 25% of them were speeding.
25% of them are speeding, and this bill says that maximum or a fine of $100. So how much of this is being driven by revenue concerns? You know, we just heard about the $636 million budget deficit the city has, and how much of it has to do with safety?
Sure, it doesn't hurt to have an extra revenue source in a cash-strapped city, but Gabe Klein, the new commissioner of the Chicago Department of Transportation, plucked from Washington, D.C. by Mayor Emanuel, was on this program when he first was introduced onto the job. And he said one of his chief goals is to slow traffic down in Chicago. And this is seen as a way to do it. And it's done in other cities. And CDOT sent me statistics of a few other municipalities that have red light cameras issuing speeding citations. They said that in Montgomery County, Maryland, collisions went down 28% in these intersections, and then in Scottsdale, Arizona, they went down 44%.
And as for the prospect, back to the revenue side of the equation, sure, any estimates as to how much revenue this might raise?
The city does not have a specific estimate as to how much revenue this might raise, but the bill says that the money has to be set aside for certain initiatives, public safety, initiatives to improve pedestrian and traffic safety, and infrastructure projects. Now, it will be introduced in the fall veto session, which begins next week down in Springfield. There's sure to be questions on, is this Big Brother peering into our lives? Is there a constitutional issue here? We don't want to be in the prognostication business, but with the backing of Mayor Emanuel and House Speaker Madigan, the prospects for passage probably pretty good.
Paris, thank you.
All right, all you carnivores, vegetarians, and vegans, listen up. Entomophagy may be where it's at, if only I could pronounce it. That's the practice of eating the most readily available food resource on the planet, and it's not meats, grains, fruits, or vegetables. With the world population recently reaching 7 billion, some Chicagoans would like the rest of us to give this cuisine a try. And Chicago Tonight's Paris Schutz did just that and reports on what tickled his palate.
So how will we feed 7 billion mouths? Food prices are high. There isn't enough livestock to go around or an environmentally sustainable way to raise all of it. One answer may be closer than you think. That's right. It might be time to think of our creepy, crawly critter friends as part of that other C word, cuisine.
Eating insects is actually really a common thing in most cultures.
Steve Sullivan is the curator of urban ecology at the Notabart Nature Museum. He says a diet devoid of insects is a relatively new phenomenon.
Every single one of us have ancestors who ate insects and loved them. When I lived in Cambodia for a time, I ate water beetles and tarantulas and things like this as part of just a regular thing that might show up on the meal.
Sullivan says that insects can be sautéed, deep-fried, boiled, or dried.
In general, eating insects is going to be more sustainable because we can get more pounds of protein from an insect than we can from something like a cow or a pig.
Black beetles are a good choice for starters. One can eat the adult, but Sullivan says it's best to start with the larvae, sort of the insect version of veal.
Does that really look appetizing to you?
Well, again, appetizing is sort of in the eye of the beholder and the eye of the culture.
At the University of Chicago, a group of underclassmen won a $10,000 grant to research ways to make insects appetizing to more people. The key, they say, is to make people forget they're eating something with legs, antennae, and wings.
If you can remove all of those elements, or at least conceal them in a way that's just taking advantage of the nutrition, people are going to be a lot more willing to try insects.
After purchasing raw materials online and hours of experimenting in the kitchen, the students are hoping a few new lines of snack foods catch on. Cricket cookies, dried mealworms, and hornworms.
Hornworms, they taste just like green beans.
As I prepared to try them myself, I thought back to a notable Chicagoan who would pave the way for the rest of us.
I just thought, well, you know, I'll start chewing it and see what happens.
Since Patty Blagojevich and other reality show contestants had done it, surely I could too.
I'm not looking. You should be noticing a distinct flavor right now.
That's distinct.
How would you describe it?
Oh, there are the legs there and the antenna. Going down real smooth.
Next up, the dried mealworm.
Crunchy.
And finally, the hardest to stomach, the chewy hornworm.
1, 2, 3, go.
Oh my God.
Within a few minutes, I was able to get over my initial discomfort to enjoy an entomophagic meal with friends. Will someone please pass the cricket? As we ate, the students reminded me that lobsters were arthropods once considered unpalatable. Now, of course, they're a delicacy. Perhaps insects hold the same fate.
Someone have a toothpick?
After our meal, we flagged down some unsuspecting U of C students for a broader focus group. The results were mixed.
Yeah, it was fun.
Thank you. Delicious.
No, thank you. No, thank you.
No, thank you.
Why not?
Right.
Why not? Because it's a bug, and I don't really want to eat a bug. I'm sorry.
While we wait for edible insects to slowly creep into Western food culture, I think I'll stick to the staples for now. For Chicago Tonight, this is Paris Schutz.